Hello, my friends. Hello, and welcome once again to stately Vaughan Manor. So today we're going to be talking about Frank Herbert's Dune. You might have heard of this book, Frank Herbert's Dune. It's kind of popular. So this is going to be the first volume that I'll be talking about from the great Frank Herbert-athon, which I'm doing. I'm going to be reading every book by Frank Herbert, with the exception of that computer manual that he wrote in the 80s. I won't be reading that one. But every other book of his that I can find, at least, I will be reading. Starting off with the Dune series. This is the first volume, of course, Dune, which came out in 1965. Groundbreaking book, this one. The best-selling science fiction novel of all time, from what I hear, anyway. Really interesting book. I read this a couple of times in my life before this reading. Once when I was just a teenager, and I remember being not particularly impressed with it when I was a teenager. I don't think I really got it at that age. I didn't quite get what this book was about back then. I read it again as an adult, liked it an awful lot. I read it a few years ago. And so this time when I read it, I probably enjoyed it the most out of the 3 times that I've read it. Science fiction novels of this kind can be a little off-putting when you just start them because you have to get acclimated to whatever world you're walking into. And you're always walking into something really strange when you pick up a science fiction novel like this. And I think that might have thrown me the first time I read it. Just trying to figure out the world and what was going on and how everything worked. There's a lot going on in this book, Dune. There's a lot you can miss the first time you read it, particularly if you read it like I did when you're pretty young. At the time, I just thought it was kind of like this superhero chosen one type of story, which it kind of is. In this novel, the House Atreides is taking over for the House Harkonnen on the desert planet of Dune, where the spice melange is produced. The only place in the universe where you can get this stuff, this spice, which can expand your consciousness. And it's needed, it's necessary, this spice, for intergalactic space travel to happen. Because in the future, in this time, the distant future, at some point, human beings had rebelled against the robots or machines, and so they don't use complicated computers anymore, which can make space travel difficult. Heck, it'll make a lot of things difficult. So they need this spice which can expand your consciousness and warp your sense of reality and do all kinds of other things. They need it to navigate space. And it's really an interesting book. So basically the House Atreides goes to Dune to take over the spice production on this planet. There's a native population called the Fremen who live there, out in the deserts. There are giant sandworms out in the deserts. The Harkonnens, the evil Harkonnens, which are led by the evil, creepy Baron Harkonnen, is out to get House Atreides. And as it turns out, the Atreides are there just as a trap. You see, this house has become too powerful, and the Emperor of the galaxy feels that they are a threat. So it's basically a trap. And as soon as they get there to Dune and start taking over, the trap is sprung. Through treachery, the House Harkonnen sweeps in and wipes out most of House Atreides, but Paul and his mother escape. They are rescued by the native population, the Fremen, and the Fremen start a rebellion. So just taking that, the bare bones plot description that I've just given you, it sounds like kind of a basic space opera, space adventure type of story. And on one level, it is that. The first time I read it, I thought it was kind of like that, but just with a bunch of extra mumbo jumbo thrown in. I didn't get it. All the things that Frank Herbert was trying to say. Frank Herbert is trying to say a lot in this book. He's talking about how important natural resources are. It's a novel about ecology. It's a novel about environment, how important water is. You really get the sense reading this book just how important water is. And unfortunately, here on the real planet Earth, we can be getting to the point soon where we can really learn something about that from this book. This book is also about a lot of other things. So Paul Atreides, the young Atreides, who is rescued by the Fremen along with his mother, he has been secretly bred he's been secretly bred to be kind of this savior type of figure. It's very complex. But he's basically a product of the Bene Gesserit. Bene Gesserit are a group or religious order of some kind of very powerful sorceresses, basically. They are in charge of things. They run everything from the background. And they have their own purposes for creating what is basically kind of a super being in Paul Atreides. So he is kind of a savior figure in this novel. And taken at face value, this could be about a savior figure who shows up to lead the Fremen and save the galaxy. But it's not that. This book is also about the danger of investing in heroes. Throughout a lot of this book, Paul can see the future because being the type of super being that he turns out to be. He can kind of see the future or versions of the future. And one thing he sees is an intergalactic jihad where the Fremen go out throughout the galaxy and just slaughter and take over and just spill gallons of blood. And it's going to be awful. And so he wants to try to stop this from happening. And he finds that harder and harder to do because he gets swept up kind of in his own legend. And it's kind of about the dangers of that. You don't really catch on to that until further along in the book. But this book is about be careful of the leaders that you follow. Be careful about building someone up to be a hero. Because there's danger in that. And what Paul Atreides and the Fremen accomplished in this book, was it worth it? Will it be worth the intergalactic slaughter that is going to follow? So there's a lot of things going on in this book. You can read this book a bunch of different ways because it's saying a bunch of different things. It's a very complicated, very interesting book. And it's one of those books that you can read a bunch of different times, and each time you read it, you're going to get something different out of it. It's that type of book. It's a very, very rich, very complicated, very interesting, very intricate narrative that on the face of things has basically a pretty simple plot, but it's everything that's going on around that plot and through that plot that is the interesting part, because it's telling you all kinds of different stuff. So really good novel, Dune. And it goes in a really interesting direction in the next book, Dune Messiah, from what I remember. So I'm looking forward to reading that one again and talking about that one. Don't want to talk any more about this one because I really think that if you have not read this, you really should read it. Maybe more than once. Because like I said, there's a lot of stuff in this book. This has been hugely influential, not just on science fiction, but also on fantasy. And you can get that as you're reading this. It kind of reads very often like a fantasy novel, even though it's a science fiction novel. Some of the science in here is so fantastic as to almost be magic, especially when it comes to Paul Atreides seeing the future and being able to see different versions of what's going to happen. Really interesting stuff. Great book that works on multiple levels. Dune by Frank Herbert. You should read this book. It's really good. So, That's Dune, the first book I'll be reading from Frank Herbert. I'm hoping to get to Dune Messiah later on this month if I'm lucky. If not, early next month, I am hoping. So, I will catch you next time here at Stately Von Manor. You guys have a great day.